Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. A major oil terminal near St. Petersburg was struck by Ukrainian drones in the early hours of Wednesday, sending smoke into the air on the opening day of Vladimir Putin's flagship International Economic Forum, according to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Now, this follows Tuesday's Russian attacks, which killed 22 people and wounded more than 130 across Ukraine. At the same time, diplomatic momentum appears to be building for Kyiv in Europe, with Hungary signaling progress in talks that could unlock the next stage of Ukraine's EU accession bid. Joining us now is Rostyslav Khotin, senior editor for the Ukrainian Service at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Good to have you with us.
Hello, Sasha.
So let's begin with this strike that we're hearing from in St. Petersburg. Now, what we're hearing is that President Zelenskyy has confirmed that the Ukrainians have struck this oil terminal near where this conference is happening. We're not sure exactly the distance, but how symbolic and how strategic is hitting that oil terminal right now?
It's the St. Petersburg oil terminal, which works for Russian oil exports, is one of the biggest in Russian Federation. It has capacity of 12.5 million tons of oil annually. It's huge. It's one of the biggest, not just in Leningrad region, but in the whole of Russia. And Ukrainian drones strike this terminal this night. It was not the first time that Ukrainians and Ukrainian drones struck Leningrad region, because there were previously attacks against Ust-Luga oil terminal in Leningrad region on the Baltic coast, but also in Primorsk in the same region. So it's not the first time that Ukrainians reached the Leningrad region, but now it was the very city of St. Petersburg. It's for the first time. And also, just the news is coming that President Zelenskyy announced that Ukrainian drones also struck the naval base in Kronstadt in Leningrad region, not far from St. Petersburg. It's like one of them. It's the main base for Russian Baltic Fleet. It's a military naval base which hosts a lot of ships and submarines. And Ukrainians were able to make the strike. It's not the first strike against Russian naval bases. We remember about Sevastopol in Crimea. We know that some ships were targeted on the Caspian Sea, but it's the first time that the base for the Russian Baltic Fleet, which one of the significant Russian out of 4 fleets, very significant fleet with zone of action, not just Baltic Sea, but Northern Atlantic Ocean and even far beyond. It's for the first time that Ukrainians made the strikes. And Kronstadt also has significance in Russian history, being as the home base for the Baltic Fleet for many, not just decades, but centuries. Also, these 2 strikes against oil terminal in St. Petersburg and naval base in Kronstadt in Leningrad region coincide with the opening of St. Petersburg Economic Forum. It's like a flagship Russian economic forum, and Putin is due to attend. President Putin is due to attend it. It's like analogy I can draw with Russia thinks it's a kind of Russian Davos, kind of, we have our own Davos, St. Petersburg Economic Forum. And that just on the very day of the first day of its opening, Ukrainians struck the oil terminal in St. Petersburg and naval base in Kronstadt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think also it's worth noting that St. Petersburg as well, for Vladimir Putin, very much his hometown, his political career very much began there. So this is going to look quite concerning for him. Now, as you said, with all of these different elements, it's the economic, you can see this now. This is making the rounds visually, so it's a very visual thing for not just Russians, but for a global audience. What do you think? In terms of this mini Davos, or this Russian Davos, if you want to call it that, you have international guests there now. What do you think this is going to impact this? Putin's been saying everything is fine. What kind of impact will this have on that message of Putin's trying to push for several years now?
I think it's a humiliation for the Kremlin. It's humiliation personally for Vladimir Putin, because indeed St. Petersburg is his hometown, where he was born and where he grew up, and where he started his political career. Also, St. Petersburg is, just want to remind our viewers that St. Petersburg is Russia's second largest city after Moscow. It's former Russian capital. Capital of Russian Empire. So it's the strategic significance in Russian mind, for Russian psychology, for Russian identity, is enormous. The value of St. Petersburg, and here comes, two strikes against oil terminal, one of the biggest in Russia, and even more powerful strike against naval base in Kronstadt, which also linked to Bolshevik revolution. That's where there was an anti-Bolshevik uprising crushed by communists at the beginning of the communist regime in Russia. So it also has significance of historical meaning for the Russian minds. I think it's these strikes, and also some Western representatives, some Western experts, businessmen who still deal with Russia. They come to St. Petersburg annually, despite the war, despite the warnings that your presence there is not welcomed because of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Nevertheless, they are still coming to Russia, hoping for the deals, for the business climate, business opportunities in Russia. And here comes two Ukrainian strikes against St. Petersburg and Leningrad region on the day of opening of the Russian Economic Forum, which is to be opened by Putin, and where he is a key speaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I think we'll very much see that, and that will be hard to ignore by all those delegates who are there, then also I think for the world to see, and obviously for Russians themselves. I want to just kind of pivot back specifically to Ukraine, also with what we're hearing in terms of the process of accession, namely also relations now that are changing for the better with Hungary and also Ukraine. Now we've heard that with the Hungarian Prime Minister was in Berlin yesterday. There's supposed to be a meeting likely meeting next week between President Zelenskyy and also Peter Magyar. What do you think is going to happen when that goes ahead? I mean, what kind of momentum is there now? What's that relationship now going to look like going forward?
Ukraine desperately wants to open the first cluster out of 6 clusters which are needed to start negotiations about joining the European Union. There is expectations that it might happen in the middle of June. Hungary removed its veto, of course, after the fall of Viktor Orban and his government. Now there is a new leader in Hungary, Peter Magyar, who is favorable of Ukrainian EU accession, but he wants to make sure that the Hungarian rights of Hungarian national ethnic minority in Transcarpathia region in far western Ukraine is protected. So he he proposes to meet President Zelenskyy possibly early next week in the town of Berehove, which is a kind of capital of Hungarian populated, where Hungarians constitute a majority districts of Transcarpathia. Possibly there, he insists on this kind of a symbolic place for such breaking event as a summit between Ukrainian and Hungarian leaders. So there is expectations that Kyiv is ready to meet some kind of demands which were put forward by the new Hungarian Prime Minister. He wants to secure more linguistic rights for local Hungarians, so that they can have their education in kindergartens, in schools, and possibly in the local administrations and higher education institutions in Hungarian language, which is fine for Ukraine. It's okay, but Ukrainians also want for Hungarians not just be fluent Hungarian speakers, but also to learn and know Ukrainian language, to be able to integrate more widely in wider Ukrainian society. That's where kind of the logic from Kyiv is coming from. So they do not want a local Hungarian community there to be kind of in a linguistic ghetto. They want Hungarians to be able to speak fluently native Hungarian language, but also to be fluent Ukrainian speakers in order to integrate widely into bigger Ukrainian society.
Yeah, so that meeting, when it does take place next week, we're not sure exactly what day, that'll be an important one between those two leaders. Really quickly, we're short on time, but I want to get your sense, Rostyslav, quickly. NATO Secretary General is due to be in, or already is in Kyiv on Wednesday today. What do you make of his meeting there? What can we expect from that kind of visit?
We can expect that President Zelenskyy might be invited to Ankara, NATO summit in Ankara in early July. That's one thing, and Zelenskyy indeed wants to go there, to be invited, because snubbing Ukrainian leader, even Ukraine is not realistically accepted as a candidate for NATO membership, of course, but nevertheless, Ukraine wants to have strategic relations with NATO as a strategic partner of NATO, and Zelenskyy desperately wants to be invited to NATO summit in Ankara, and also Zelenskyy wants to thank NATO for this prioritized Ukrainian requirement list initiative, when Europeans collect money and buy American weaponry and ammunition for Ukrainian needs. So it's led by NATO, it's led by Secretary General Mark Rutte, and Ukrainians want to underline that they are grateful for NATO for such initiative.
Yeah, and that need is still great, as we reported on that with those heavy strikes by Russia in these last 48 hours. That need is still very much there. Look, thanks so much for all that. Always a pleasure having you with us. Rostyslav Khotin there, Senior Editor for the Ukrainian Service at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.